Ever feel like your prayers are going unanswered? Do you ever wonder why it seems so difficult to hear God's voice these days? Today, we're sharing an extraordinary revelation brought to the world by Pope Leo XIV, our new spiritual guide. A wisdom, once reserved for a select few, now available to all God's children who yearn for a deeper connection with the divine. Pope Leo XIV has arrived at a pivotal moment in humanity, bringing celestial messages many have been waiting for. During his recent spiritual retreat in the Appalachian Mountains, he received a clear vision of the 5 obstacles preventing us from receiving the divine messages God constantly sends. God's children are surrounded by divine signs every day, Pope Leo XIV said in his first address, but barriers prevent them from seeing them. These words resonated deeply with the faithful present, who felt someone finally put into words what many silently experience. What I'm about to share isn't just spiritual advice. These are direct revelations the new Pope has decided to make public. Because, in his words, we're living in times where communication with the divine is more necessary than ever. These 5 obstacles Pope Leo XIV has identified are present in almost all of our lives, even if we don't realize it. The most surprising thing is that removing them doesn't require complicated practices or years of theological study. These are simple but profound changes anyone can implement in their daily life. Before we continue, I want you to think for a moment. How often have you felt there's something more, an important message trying to reach you, but for some reason, you can't quite grasp it? That feeling isn't accidental. It's the divine call, trying to break through these obstacles we'll learn to eliminate today. Prepare for a transformative spiritual journey guided by the teachings of Pope Leo XIV, which will forever change how you communicate with the divine. Pope Leo XIV shared how he received this revelation during a night of intense prayer. He was in the private chapel of St. Patrick's Cathedral when, in his words, the divine presence manifested with a clarity never before experienced. During this sacred encounter, he received the message of the 5 obstacles he urgently needed to share with all God's children. This revelation didn't come by chance. The new Pope explained that we're living in decisive times, where spiritual forces are more active than ever, and where our ability to receive divine guidance will determine our path in the coming years. We can't continue ignoring the signs God constantly sends us, Pope Leo XIV affirmed. Every day, every moment, there are divine messages personally directed to each of us. The problem isn't that God isn't speaking, but that we've lost the ability to listen. The most impactful thing about this revelation is that these obstacles aren't obvious at first glance. They're subtle barriers that have built up inside us, often without us realizing it. Barriers the modern world has reinforced, further distancing us from our natural connection with the divine. Pope Leo XIV has decided that these teachings, traditionally reserved for very closed spiritual circles, must now be shared with all people of faith. The time has come for every child of God to regain their ability to receive divine messages, he declared with conviction. These revelations are especially important for those who feel something's missing in their spiritual life, that their prayers seem to get lost in the air, or that they yearn for clearer guidance in moments of confusion or difficulty. The first obstacle Pope Leo XIV has identified is what he calls the noisy mind. In this fast-paced world we live in, our minds are constantly bombarded with information, worries, to-do lists, and distractions. It's as if we have hundreds of voices talking at the same time inside our heads. When the mind is full of noise, Pope Leo XIV explains, it's impossible to hear God's gentle whisper. And he's right. Think about how many times a day you check your phone, jump from one task to another, or find yourself worried about the future or regretting the past. In that mental state, divine messages simply can't penetrate. This obstacle is especially powerful in our digital age. Social media, constant news, messages and notifications create a mental storm that keeps us disconnected from the divine. It's like trying to hear a soft melody in the middle of a busy street, says the Pope. The music is there, but the noise completely drowns it out. To overcome this first obstacle, Pope Leo XIV recommends what he calls moments of still mind. It's not about complicated meditations or hours of silence. These are intentional pauses of just a few minutes, several times a day, where we simply stop the constant flow of thoughts. Start with 3 minutes, 3 times a day, the Pope advises. Simply stop, breathe deeply, and allow your mind to quiet down. Don't fight the thoughts, just watch them pass like clouds in the sky. With this simple practice, we begin to create spaces in our mind where divine messages can be received. Pope Leo XIV also suggests reviewing our digital habits. Every notification that interrupts your day is a potential barrier to a divine message, he warns. He recommends setting specific times to check messages and social media instead of being constantly connected. The benefits of overcoming this obstacle go far beyond the spiritual. People who practice mental stillness report greater clarity, better decisions, and an inner peace that transforms all aspects of their life. But most importantly, as the Pope points out, in the still mind, God can finally speak and be heard. When we eliminate mental noise, we begin to notice signs, meaningful coincidences, and moments of intuition that we previously overlooked. These are the first indications that divine messages are reaching us. If these tips are resonating in your heart, don't miss the opportunity to continue receiving these special teachings from Pope Leo XIV. Subscribe to our channel now and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the revelations we will continue to share. Your spiritual path can be completely transformed with this sacred knowledge. The second obstacle revealed by Pope Leo XIV is the hardened heart. This is perhaps one of the most difficult blocks to recognize because it develops slowly, almost without us noticing. A hardened heart, explains the Pope, is one that has protected itself so much from pain that it has also closed itself off to love and divine messages. In his revelation, Pope Leo XIV describes how life's disappointments, pains and betrayals create protective layers around our heart. It's a natural defense mechanism, but one that comes at a very high spiritual cost. Each unhealed disillusionment is like a brick in the wall separating our heart from God, he says with wisdom. How do you know if this obstacle is present in your life? The Pope mentions some clear signs. If you find it hard to trust others, if you maintain superficial relationships to avoid being hurt, if you find it difficult to forgive, or if you feel an inner resistance when it comes to opening yourself completely to love. All of these are indications of a heart that has hardened. God speaks first to the heart, not the mind, Pope Leo XIV explains. When our heart is hardened, we can hear the divine words, but we can't truly feel them. And without feeling, there's no real transformation. To overcome this obstacle, the new Pope recommends what he calls the practice of vulnerable love. It's not about naively exposing ourselves to pain, but about consciously opening small spaces of vulnerability where love can enter again. Start with something small, he advises, perhaps sharing a feeling you'd normally hide or reaching out to someone you've kept at a distance. Another powerful practice he suggests is heart meditation. Unlike other forms of meditation focused on the mind, this focuses on consciously directing our attention to the heart area while breathing deeply. Imagine that each inhale brings light and warmth to your heart, slowly melting the layers of hardness, explains the Pope. Forgiveness is also a fundamental tool for overcoming this obstacle. Pope Leo XIV proposes a simple but profound exercise. writing a letter of forgiveness, which doesn't necessarily have to be sent to those who have hurt us. The act of writing releases accumulated pain and begins to soften the heart, he assures. When our heart begins to soften, we experience a new sensitivity towards the divine. We feel the answers to our prayers not only as thoughts, but as deep certainties that resonate within us. Divine messages become living experiences, not just intellectual concepts. The true indicator that we're overcoming this obstacle is when we begin to feel greater compassion, not only towards those we love, but towards all human beings. As Pope Leo XIV says, a softened heart recognizes the divine presence in every person and thus can receive messages from God through everyday encounters. If you feel that these words are touching something deep within you, I invite you to subscribe to our channel right now. Turn on notifications to receive more revelations from Pope Leo XIV that will help you transform your spiritual life and maintain a more direct connection with the divine. The third obstacle that Pope Leo XIV has revealed is disconnection from community. This is a particularly relevant block in our times, where individualism has become almost a religion in itself. God created us to live in communion, explains the Pope. When we isolate ourselves, we lose one of the main ways He speaks to us, through others. This revelation may be surprising to many who think of spirituality as something purely personal. However, Pope Leo XIV insists that faith lived in solitude is like an instrument that only plays one note, while faith shared in community is a complete symphony where divine messages can be expressed in all their richness. Maria Elena, a teacher from Phoenix, Arizona, experienced this in a transformative way. For years, she had kept her faith strictly private, praying alone and avoiding any religious groups. I thought my connection with God was something just between Him and me, she tells us. But I always felt as if I was only receiving fragments of a larger message. Everything changed when, following a friend's advice, she decided to join a small prayer group in her neighborhood. At first, I felt uncomfortable, Maria Elena recalls. But after a few weeks, I began to notice something extraordinary. The spiritual experiences of others complemented mine, like pieces of a puzzle that finally fit together. One day, while the group was sharing reflections on a Bible passage, Maria Elena had a revelation. I suddenly understood that during all those years, God had been sending me only one part of the message, and the other parts were being received by different people. Together, we could see the complete picture. Pope Leo XIV explains that this is no coincidence. God, in His infinite wisdom, rarely delivers the entire message to one person. Rather, He distributes fragments among several hearts, which only by uniting reveal the complete truth. This is one of the fundamental reasons why community is essential for receiving divine messages. Spiritual isolation has profound consequences. When we separate ourselves from the community, warns the Pope, we not only lose the collective wisdom, but also the shared discernment that helps us distinguish true divine messages from our own desires or fears. To overcome this obstacle, Pope Leo XIV recommends actively seeking what he calls communities of resonance, groups where we can honestly share our spiritual experiences without fear of judgment. It doesn't have to be a large group, he clarifies. Even 2 or 3 people gathered with sincere intention can create the space for divine messages to manifest fully. He also suggests practices such as shared reading of sacred texts, where each person shares what resonates with them personally, thus creating a richer and more complete understanding. It's amazing how the same passage can speak in such different ways to different people, observes the Pope. In that diversity of interpretations, the deepest divine message is often revealed. Maria Elena now leads her own spiritual reflection group. What I've learned is that God speaks to us through many voices, she says with emotion. Sometimes the answer to my deepest prayer comes from the words of another person who doesn't even know what I'm going through. Perhaps the most powerful testimony about the importance of community was shared by Pope Leo XIV himself. In my moments of greatest doubt and spiritual darkness, he confessed, it wasn't my solitary prayers that brought me clarity, but the simple words of an elderly man in a small parish who unknowingly answered exactly the question I carried in my heart. If this message has touched your heart and you wish to continue receiving these special revelations from Pope Leo XIV, I invite you to subscribe to our channel now. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the transformative teachings we will continue to share. Together, we can form a community that helps each one to receive divine messages more clearly. The fourth obstacle revealed by Pope Leo XIV is the lack of sacred silence. In a world where constant noise has become the norm, we've lost what the Pope describes as the blank canvas, where God paints his deepest messages. Silence is not simply the absence of sound, explains Pope Leo XIV. It's a sacred space, an inner sanctuary where the divine can manifest without the distortions produced by the noise of the world. This obstacle is particularly difficult to overcome because our modern society seems to be afraid of silence. Think about how many times a day we seek to fill every moment with some kind of sound, music while driving, television in the background while dining, podcasts while exercising. Even in moments that could be of natural contemplation, such as waiting in line or walking through a park, many of us immediately turn to our phones to avoid that silence. This aversion to silence isn't accidental, warns the Pope. Constant noise keeps our attention on the superficial and prevents us from delving deeper to where divine messages can be heard. In fact, almost all spiritual traditions throughout history have valued silence as an essential component of connection with the divine. Sacred silence shouldn't be confused with the simple absence of activity. It's not about doing nothing, clarifies Pope Leo XIV. It's about intentionally creating spaces where our entire being can put itself in reception mode, where we can listen not with the ears, but with the soul. To begin overcoming this obstacle, the Pope recommends incorporating what he calls moments of intentional silence into our daily routine. Start with just 5 minutes each morning before the day fills with activities, he suggests. Sit in a quiet place, without music, without a phone, without distractions, and simply remain in that sacred silence. He also proposes the practice of silent walks, where we go for a walk without any electronic devices, concentrating simply on the natural sounds, and eventually on the silence that exists between those sounds. Nature teaches us the perfect rhythm between sound and silence, explains the Pope. Observe how after a bird's song, there's a moment of stillness, as if creation itself knew that it's in those spaces where the divine can be perceived. Another practical recommendation is to create noise-free zones in our home or in our life. It could be a specific room where no electronic devices are allowed, or certain times of the day dedicated to silence. Even families with children can implement this practice, assures the Pope. In fact, teaching children the value of silence is one of the most valuable spiritual gifts we can offer them. The benefits of overcoming this obstacle are profound. In sacred silence, says Pope Leo XIV, we begin to distinguish between our own thoughts and divine inspirations. We learn to recognize that soft but clear voice that doesn't come from our ego, but from a deeper source. People who regularly practice sacred silence report greater inner clarity, better decisions, and above all, a sense of peace and connection that remains even when they return to the noisy activities of everyday life. Silence isn't just a means to hear God, concludes the Pope. It's in itself a divine language, a form of communication that goes beyond words. If you feel that these teachings can transform your spiritual life, I invite you to subscribe to our channel right now. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the revelations from Pope Leo XIV that we will continue to share. Your path to a deeper connection with the divine is just beginning. The fifth and final obstacle revealed by Pope Leo XIV is perhaps the most surprising and profound: the fear of divine truth. This obstacle operates at such a subconscious level that many of us don't even realize its presence in our spiritual life. At a conscious level, explains the Pope, we all say we want to hear God, that we yearn to receive his messages. But deep down, we often fear what those messages may ask of us. This subtle but powerful fear leads us to create internal filters that block precisely the divine messages we claim to seek. Why do we fear divine truth? Pope Leo XIV points out several reasons. First, we know intuitively that God's messages often call us to step out of our comfort zone, to change, to grow in ways that may be initially painful. Second, divine truth sometimes contradicts convictions or beliefs that we've clung to for years. And third, authentic divine messages almost always invite us to greater spiritual responsibility. Carlos, an executive from Los Angeles, experienced this obstacle dramatically. For years I prayed for direction in my life, he tells us, but when I finally started receiving clear signs that I should dedicate part of my time to serving those in need, I found 1,000 excuses to ignore them. His moment of awakening came during a spiritual retreat. I was meditating when I suddenly realized it wasn't that God wasn't answering me all these years. It was that I didn't want to hear the answers he was giving me because they involved changes that scared me. With this understanding, Carlos began to practice what Pope Leo XIV calls sacred surrender, the conscious willingness to accept divine truth, whatever it may be. It wasn't easy, Carlos admits. I had to face many fears, but when I finally surrendered and accepted the path that was being shown to me, I experienced a freedom and peace I had never known before. Pope Leo XIV points out that this fear of divine truth manifests in very subtle ways. Sometimes, he explains, we keep ourselves so busy that we don't have time for the deep reflection where divine messages might emerge. Other times, we create so much internal noise with worries and distractions that we drown out God's gentle voice. And sometimes we simply direct our prayers towards safe requests, avoiding the big questions we fear to see answered. To overcome this obstacle, the Pope proposes a practice he calls the prayer of total openness. It's a form of prayer where we consciously declare our willingness to receive any message, even those that may challenge or discomfort us. It's not about asking for something specific, clarifies the Pope. It's about creating a space of total receptivity, saying sincerely, I'm ready to hear whatever you need to tell me, and I'm willing to act accordingly. He also recommends the exercise of courageous questions, moments of reflection where we dare to ask those questions we've secretly avoided. Ask yourself, what change do I know in my heart I should make but have been avoiding? What relationship needs healing through my forgiveness or my apology? What calling have I been ignoring? These questions, formulated in a space of sincere prayer, often reveal the divine messages we've been blocking. Carlos now dedicates 1 day a week to working with homeless youth. What I thought would be a sacrifice has become the greatest blessing of my life, he confesses with emotion. And the most surprising thing is that since I accepted this calling, my ability to receive divine guidance in all areas of my life has grown exponentially. It's as if by saying yes to one message, I had opened the door to many more. Pope Leo XIII assures that overcoming this obstacle brings with it an extraordinary spiritual freedom. When we no longer fear what God may ask of us, when we trust completely that His messages, although challenging, always lead to our greatest good, then divine communication flows without obstacles. We no longer receive just fragments or distant echoes, but clear and transformative revelations. If these words have resonated in your heart and you wish to delve deeper into these special teachings of Pope Leo XIV, I invite you to subscribe to our channel right now. Turn on notifications to receive more revelations that can completely transform your spiritual life and your ability to receive divine messages. Now that we've explored the 5 obstacles revealed by Pope Leo XIV, it's time to understand how we can implement this knowledge in our daily lives. The new Pope has proposed a practical 7-day plan to begin eliminating these barriers and opening the channel of communication with the divine. Spiritual transformation doesn't happen overnight, explains Pope Leo XIV. It's a gradual process that requires intention, practice, and patience. But with consistent actions, even small ones, we can see profound results in a surprisingly short time. The 7-day plan begins with an honest assessment. Dedicate the first day to reflecting on which of the 5 obstacles is most present in your life. Don't judge what you discover, advises the Pope. Simply observe with compassion which barrier seems to be blocking your ability to receive divine messages most strongly. Days 2 and 3 are dedicated to creating spaces of sacred silence and mental stillness. The Pope recommends starting with periods of 5 to 10 minutes, 3 times a day, where you simply stop, breathe deeply, and remain in receptive silence. Don't expect great revelations immediately, he warns. You're preparing the ground, creating the space where divine messages can be received. The 4th day focuses on the practice of the open heart. Pope Leo XIV suggests a simple but powerful exercise. Place a hand over your heart and visualize how any hardness or excessive protection melts away with each breath. Imagine your heart as a flower that slowly opens to the divine light, he proposes. With each inhale, feel it expand. With each exhale, feel it release any resistance. Days 5 and 6 are dedicated to community connection and to overcoming the fear of divine truth. The Pope recommends sharing your spiritual path with at least one trusted person and doing the prayer of total openness that we mentioned earlier. Consciously declare your willingness to receive any message you need to hear, even if it involves changes or challenges, he insists. The 7th day is to integrate all these practices and establish a commitment to your new path of spiritual receptivity. This is not the end, but the true beginning, explains Pope Leo XIV. From now on, incorporate these practices into your daily life, making receptivity to divine messages a constant priority. How will you know if you're progressing? The Pope mentions several signs: greater inner peace, clearer and more accurate decisions, meaningful synchronicities in your daily life, and a growing sense of purpose and direction. But perhaps the clearest sign, he says, is when you begin to recognize the divine presence not as something distant that occasionally communicates with you, but as a constant companion whose guidance is always available. It's important to understand that eliminating these obstacles is not a linear or perfect process. There will be days where the obstacles seem to return with force, warns the Pope. Moments where the connection seems to weaken. Don't be discouraged. This is a natural part of the spiritual path. The important thing is to remain faithful to the practices with patience and trust. Pope Leo XIV concludes with a powerful promise. When we eliminate these 5 obstacles, we not only improve our ability to receive divine messages, but we completely transform our experience of life. Uncertainty gives way to clarity, fear to trust, loneliness to deep communion. We begin to live not from our human limitations, but from the infinite wisdom that is constantly available to all God's children. We've reached the end of these extraordinary revelations shared by Pope Leo XIV. We've learned about the 5 obstacles that prevent us from receiving divine messages: the noisy mind, the hardened heart, disconnection from community, the lack of sacred silence, and the fear of divine truth. We've discovered how each of these obstacles operates in our lives, and most importantly, we've received practical tools to overcome them. As Pope Leo XIV said, "The ability to receive divine messages isn't a gift reserved for a select few. It's our birthright as children of God. All we need to do is remove the obstacles that we ourselves, often unknowingly, have placed in the way." I invite you to reflect on what you've learned today. Which obstacle resonates most strongly in your life? Which practice seems most accessible to begin with? Remember that you don't need to do it all at once. As the Pope advises, start with small, consistent steps and watch how your ability to receive divine guidance strengthens day by day. The world around us is full of noise, distractions, and superficial messages that compete for our attention. It has never been more important to learn to tune in to that higher frequency, that divine wisdom that can guide us through the challenges of our time. Pope Leo XIV reminds us that in every moment, God is trying to communicate with us, not through grand, spectacular manifestations, but through whispers to the heart, signs in our daily lives, and the wisdom that arises in sacred silence. Imagine for a moment what your life would be like if you could clearly receive these divine messages. How many difficult decisions would become clear? How much inner peace could you experience even in the midst of challenging circumstances? How much more purpose and meaning would each day have? This is the promise that Pope Leo XIV offers us through these teachings. Not a path without difficulties, but a constant connection with the source of wisdom and love that can guide us through any challenge we face. The revelations we've shared today are just the beginning. Pope Leo XIV continues to offer spiritual guidance for these crucial times, and we'll be sharing more of his teachings in upcoming videos. If these words have touched your heart, if you feel that inner calling to deepen your connection with the divine, I invite you to take 2 important actions right now. First, share in the comments which of these 5 obstacles you feel is most present in your spiritual life. Your experience can help others who are facing similar challenges. Second, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the upcoming revelations from Pope Leo XIV. Each video is a piece of the spiritual puzzle that can deeply transform your relationship with the divine. Remember the final words that Pope Leo XIII shared in this revelation. Every child of God has direct access to divine wisdom. The messages are being sent constantly. The only question is, are we ready to receive them? May peace and divine clarity accompany you as you begin to remove these obstacles from your life. Until our next encounter, where we will continue to explore the extraordinary revelations that Pope Leo XIV has brought for this special time in the history of humanity.